Hello and welcome to another edition of Planet Outlook. On this episode, we have the talented wildlife scientist, Lauren Hennelly from the United States. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us. It's aloha since you are joining from exotic Hawaii. Let me greet you with aloha.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, your recent paper has been making a lot of news headlines in India and maybe in the United States. You've been a wolf researcher and you've dreamt of wolves from a very young stage. As a kid, I read your university release, which says you were dreaming of wolves since you were in fifth standard. So tell us the story. I will come to the, I'll just I'll interrupt you. We'll come to the India part and the research a little later, but I just want to hear how it all started.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my family would also love this because they know like the whole story behind like me liking wolves. But yeah, I've always liked animals as a kid from like a very young age. And we grew up originally, like I'm from Illinois, which is kind of in the middle of the US, and it has like grasslands. There's no wolves there. They're probably like 100 miles away or more. So I had a dog as a kid, and I started reading a lot about dogs, and then I started reading a lot about wolves, since wolves are the ancestor of dogs. And I just got more and more interested just by reading about wolves. My parents were very supportive too. So they would buy me different wolf books, and we went to different zoos that had wolves. And that kind of got me into reading more about ecosystems and ecology. And eventually in high school, I actually got kind of out of this wolf phase that I was in middle school and elementary school. And I got interested in broader questions. Like I was more interested in like genetics, which kind of morphed into like my actual PhD project. And in undergrad, I was a genetics major, and then I did like conservation biology, and I majored in evolutionary biology. And it wasn't until this later trip when I went to India for the first time and learned about the wolves here. And there's like this bigger story with these wolves, that there's like some hints that they were like this oldest wolf lineage. And wolves are just found in so many places. So they're really interesting to study. And so it combined kind of like all these interests that I had, and then plus wolves, which was just like a really like childhood thing that I really liked a lot. So it just kind of combined it together, and then I just went off from there.
How did India happen? It was a kind of a tourist trip, or you came with a very focused thing on work on wolves here?
Yeah, that's like also a good question. Because I didn't have like, as a kid or anything, I never was like, I'm going to work on wolves in India. Like I never thought that. And I never even thought I would actually like be studying this. As if you asked me when I was like in fifth grade or something, or in high school. But after undergrad, during undergrad, I took advantage of a lot of the like study abroad trips. So studying abroad, I went to like Ecuador and for a tropical conservation program. And I did like different little fieldwork stuff in Wisconsin. And in my senior year, I met a professor named Dr. Trevor Price, who studies birds. He's been studying birds in India since like the 1970s. And I met him, and we had lunch, and he was saying like he needed a field assistant. And it was to study the greenish warbler in Jammu and Kashmir and in Manali. So I was like really excited about it. So I went, and that was kind of like my first trip there. It was like right after I graduated. And like, I've never climbed a mountain before that. But I was like, just put everything into that. And we like did like really intense field work. And then I joined like a group at WI to study birds in Uttarakhand. And then I learned about wolves when I was there. And then I pursued that with a Fulbright grant.
So when you were in the Himalayas doing this bird research with Trevor, you had no idea about the wolves in the Himalayas.
No, yeah, I had no idea. Even in central India too. They weren't. That's why I was like so shocked when I learned that there's wolves in India, and it was from a graduate student who was studying wolves in India that I met at WI. And he told me about it, and I was like, oh my god, like I had no idea. So that, and then I read more about them, and then I was like really inspired to do like a project on them.
You came and joined the Wildlife Institute of India on your fellowship, on your Fulbright fellowship, and you joined Dr. Bilal Habib's team, who has been working for a very long time on wolves.
Yeah. I ended up joining his team because he had a lot of recent projects on wolves, and he was really excited about like doing different projects. So I proposed to do a study studying the howls of the wolves, and that grant is only 9 months long, so it's quite short compared to like a program that's like 5 years for a PhD. So you can't do like that much, but that's what he was really excited about because he likes animal behavior too. So so that I proposed like this howl study. He was really excited about it. And then that's kind of like started the ball rolling to do this wolf howl study that then led to the genomics study.
So how did it begin, if you can tell our viewers, which are the places you visited in India for recording wolf howls?
Yeah, that was a crazy adventure. So we went to Ladakh, and we were there I was there for 2 months about in the winter. So it was very cold on the Chantang. And I had a team with like one field assistant, one driver, and we like went out to record these howls of wolves and camping. We went to Spiti to track wild wolves. And then we also went to Maharashtra near Nanaj and then outside of Pune to record Indian wolves. And then I also went to different zoos in India. So I went to Sikkim, to Darjeeling, and then to Delhi, and I think Pune Zoo. Yeah, Nainital Zoo we went to. Yeah, so it was really fun. I traveled like alone a lot too, to all these zoos and everything. But yeah, it was like.
And what did all these different recordings led to?
Yeah, so that study, we then we compared these wolf recordings that I spent a long time trying to get from these wolves. I compared them to all different other wolves of the world that were online already. And then I also collaborated with some researchers. So then we measured different kind of these acoustic variables of the howl, kind of like with human voice. You can measure like how high in pitch it goes, or like how low, how long. So we did that. And so I kind of, was studying like if these howls were different from each other. And then this whole project was actually kind of taken on by another PhD student at WI. So this one kind of was the fodder maybe to the next project that Sogato has done to identify individual wolves based off of howls.
So is it true that every individual wolf has a distinct howl? That's how you recognize an individual?
Yeah, so Sogato has been working on that. And there's a little bit of a confidence window on how confident you can be that it's that individual wolf. And that's kind of what he was studying, on how useful of a tool that it can be. But he found that the wolf howls are pretty like distinct from each other. Like you can be like pretty confident that these wolves, like you hear a howl and it's likely from a certain wolf. And then it's also useful because you can tell like if there's puppies, if you're recording. You can also record it and then look at the program. You can see how many wolves are howling, so you can kind of count minimum number maybe of wolves in the area.
But you also did field work in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about the wilderness in Pakistan and the wolves in Pakistan.
Yeah, that project also was kind of a surprise. But we had a Pakistani student in our lab at UC Davis who came for 6 months. So that started, and I was like talking with her a lot about wildlife and stuff. So that kind of started this Pakistan project. And I've been to Pakistan twice too, and kind of set up a bunch of collaborators there and met a lot of students there and professors and different NGOs. And I've traveled a bit too. But yeah, the wolves there, there's not much known about them. They're not really on, there's more scientific research being done on the wolves, but there's a lot of gaps. There's almost no studies from more like southern Pakistan. So the Indian wolf, it's like there's no really population estimate, and I just hear that they're very rare and they're just declining. There's wolves in the mountains too, and there's wolves even kind of like in the foothills, like in between the plains and the high mountains, which you don't really have in India, that there's wolves there because it's a lot drier in Pakistan in that region. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then it's interesting from evolution too, like that these wolves, there's different kind of like lineages wolves. There's like this Indian lineage, this ancient lineage, but then there's also the wolves kind of widespread and they meet in Pakistan. So kind of figuring out how far west this Indian lineage goes is really important.
So how all this mystery unfolded? I'm very curious to know, how did you arrive at this wonderful conclusion that the Indian grey wolf is one of the oldest wolves lineages in the world?
Yeah. So the first thing that we had to do was to sequence the genome of the wolves. And the genome is all the DNA, pretty much all the DNA, that nuclear DNA in a cell. And that's like all of it is the genome. So it's huge. It's like 2.5 or 4 billion base pairs. So that was the first step. And
just let me interrupt you. So how do you get the DNA? It's from the wolf scat. So you're looking for wolf poop.
Actually, so the wolf, that's a good question. So the wolf scat is actually not good enough to get the genome.
Okay.
Because it's kind of degraded sometimes. Okay. So what you really need is a tissue or a blood sample. Okay. And luckily with this collaboration with Bilal's lab, they were collaring wolves at the time. So that allowed us to have, to get some really nice samples that were all under, good veterinary care and stuff like that. But yeah, so but that's a really hard part, is just to get a sample of a wolf because there's so few, and it's very difficult to, get in the field and get to them and everything. So that's how we got that genome sequenced. And then once you have the genome, it takes a lot of kind of like coding skills, and then kind of reading a lot about different methods. And there's a bunch of other wolf genomes online. So I worked on this project for a very long time, just because I had to learn all of the skills to do this one paper. It's because it's my first, genomics paper. So I had to learn a lot, but it allowed me to learn like all the kind of the cutting edge methods as well in the field to then apply to this paper. Yeah, and then we build a tree, kind of like what you would see like with a human tree. So we kind of built a tree of wolves across the world and looked at different parts of the genome to build that tree, and used like, statistical methods. And that then led to that conclusion that the Indian wolf is likely the oldest lineage of wolves in the world.
And how long are you now working? What's the time period of coming to this conclusion? 3 years, 4 years? How long have you been working on this?
Oh man, I think it's been 4 years, which is a lot, because the samples were kind of in 2017, and then getting them sequenced took a long time, and then getting all the data, learning everything, and then writing the paper, and then there's the pandemic in between. So so it took a long time, but it allowed us to do like really good work with
Do you think this paper will help bringing in more attention to the Indian wolf? Because it seems it never got its due, although it's a large carnivore in India. It hasn't got its due in terms of other, like all the spotlight has gone to either the tiger, either the elephant, or the rhino.
Yeah, I really hope so, and I think it will, and in Pakistan, hopefully too. I'm very hopeful that it will hopefully, get more attention to them. One major thing that should happen, and hopefully will happen soon, is that the taxonomy of the wolves needs to change a bit now. And with that taxonomic change, it'll really put focus on that the Indian wolf is only found in these regions, and that that may lead to then kind of stronger policy scale of like protection on these wolves. And that may also then kind of strengthen these on the ground efforts. And then it also allows on the ground efforts to have maybe more strength in like proposals or grants or something like that too, and like funding from, maybe the government in India to put into wolves, because they're like this unique animal. They're even more endangered than we thought. And hopefully inspires local people as well, that like these wolves.
I just wanted to come into that, because in the US and also in Europe, the wolf has always been a persecuted species. Whereas it's not the same case in Asia, in India and Pakistan. So when you are in the field, what have you noticed with the local communities who share the same landscape with the wolves?
Yeah, oh, that's a hard question. So I haven't spent like a ton of time lately in the field. But I guess, it's quite a difficult question, because I've worked in Idaho, actually, on gray wolves too, in the US. And maybe like there's like the local people living with wolves, and there's like the general public. So the general public, like in the US, many people kind of really like wolves. Like there's wolves on people's pictures on people's walls, which I didn't like see that as much in India. Whereas like, there's not as much like awareness about wolves maybe, or the tiger and the elephant and stuff really have an importance and are more recognized than wolves. I guess that's for the general.
What about the landscapes? Just tell us, because many people watching us have never seen a wolf landscape, the grassland landscape. So how was it in central India? How was it in the Ladakh, in the Himalayan region?
The Ladakh was amazing. It's amazing. Wolves live there. It's so big and vast. It's like hard to even imagine that you could find a wolf there, because there's no trees. It's extremely quiet. There's no insect noises at all. So it's just like very quiet, and you can see for like so many miles. And yeah, and I would see wolves sometimes, and there'd be like a little dot in the distance that I would see them trot away. It was amazing. And then central India was also very beautiful. Like grasslands maybe don't get their fair share of like how beautiful they are. But like Pune, around Pune, it's like pretty hilly out there too. So you have this like really cool like hills and shapes of the hills too. And like in the monsoon, I wasn't there in monsoon, but it's all green in the monsoon. And I was there in February, and it was kind of like a yellowish color across the landscape. But yeah, it's a really cool landscape. And then you see hyenas and black buck on the landscape.
So I believe this study is just one of the papers, a part of your PhD work. So what's next, if I may ask?
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of like shorter term with other projects, we are studying Pakistan wolves, and we're kind of studying their genomics as well and their genetics. And that's been super exciting to work with both like scientists there, and then to kind of like move over to another region where wolves are found, these Indian wolves are found. And then in the future, I'm like still thinking about it. But I would love, like, we'll see. But if I did go into kind of academia professor life, I think I would want to have a lab where like we could study kind of West Asian, Pakistan, and like kind of fauna with genomics, and then kind of have like a nice exchange of like students from these regions coming to the lab and learning.
Is there a possibility that the Pakistan population can be a subspecies of the Indian grey wolf? Because is there a connection, or you think it's a separate population?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that like east of the Indus River, I think is Indian wolf, like this old Indian wolf lineage. I'm not sure like exactly how kind of pure they might be, if they're admixed a little bit to like to the other wolf, the widespread wolf, or if they're just like there's no gene flow in between with the widespread wolf, and it's just like pure Indian wolf. I feel like that might be it. I mean, it used to be more connected in those regions. I mean, between India and Pakistan, and then the mountain range, like west of the Indus, I don't know, like Baluchistan, I don't know what's going on there. And like, yeah, it could be Indian wolf. It could be this like whole Arctic lineage that I have a figure of, or it could be like a mixture of both, where it's like a zone of like contact between the lineages. So I don't know, but I think east of the Indus is probably Indian wolf. So but I'd have to get data.
But this is going to be part of your series of studies, upcoming studies also, I believe.
Yeah, part of it. Yeah, I'm trying to answer that question most fully as possible with the samples I have, but it's not a perfect spread of samples.
But there is good news on wolves in some parts of Europe. The wolves are coming back. Also in US, we've seen the Yellowstone reporting wolves coming back. So what's in generic? It's a difficult question, I know, but are you positive on wolf conservation as a whole across the world?
I think I think I am more positive about it. Yeah, like especially in the US and in Europe, they're coming back. But in India and Pakistan, it's really difficult, I feel like. I mean, like it's been 20 years since that last estimate of Indian wolves from a 2,000, 3,000 population estimate, but that's 20 years ago. So like what's going on the landscape, and like, I mean, hopefully people, there's people studying that too right now. But I mean, Indian wolves face a lot of threats, and a lot more than like other wolves in other regions of the world, especially in Pakistan too. So I'm hopeful for, wolf conservation in many regions, and I am hopeful for conservation of wolves in India and Pakistan. But it's difficult for them though, like more threats than other places.
Threats you mean in threats of the habitat or threats from people? What kind of threats?
Yeah, I think like compared to like wolves in Europe or wolves in the US or in Canada or in Russia, they have like pretty big landscapes, vast landscapes. Usually they're found in areas where there's low human population, and not a lot of feral dogs in those regions either. But for Indian wolves and Pakistan wolves, like when you look at like a human density map, there's a lot of human density in Pakistan. In India and Pakistan. But and then I saw your video with like Abby, and that only 5% of the grasslands are protected, and just like there's a lot of feral dogs. Like the habitat is very, if they're losing habitat, it's hard to like get back habitat for wolves, and they need quite a lot of habitat. So like that is a pretty big threat compared to these wolf populations.
Yeah, and you just mentioned feral dogs. So just explain how much threat feral dogs pose to Indian wildlife.
Yeah. For Indian wildlife, I've read and I've seen that they do pose quite a big threat, specifically to wolves. Dogs and wolves can interbreed with each other. That's one threat. So it can affect kind of this genetic integrity of the population. And I've also seen this happen, in that behavior in Spiti with Himalayan wolves. And then also dogs and wolves can pass diseases back and forth. Dogs, if there's a lot of them, they could, like if there's food, they could push off a wolf from a food kill. So it's pretty, because they're ancestors of the wolf. They can interbreed. They're about the same size. They can compete with each other potentially. So And I
remember one of your photographs. You've documented this in the Himalayas, in somewhere in Spiti or Ladakh.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, in Spiti. Yeah, I was shocked. Luckily, I had my camera nearby, so I took a photo. But yeah, I was like, "What is going on?" Like, couldn't believe it.
So thank you, Lauren. It's been fantastic chatting with you on wolves, and many congratulations on this paper, and best of luck for the rest of the PhD work. We'll see you whenever you're next in India. So best of luck.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was fun to talk about wolves.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.